This week on Overtime, we talk about unity and we introduce you to one of my favorite new people, Pastor David Ward. Make sure you like, subscribe. Let's get it. Welcome to Overtime, a weekly podcast where we dive a little bit deeper into Sunday morning. And today I'm excited to introduce to the Overtime podcast spam. Give it up one time for my man, David Ward.
Thank you.
There's literally nobody here except Dom and Justin, so I guess I'll clap. Clap.
Thank you for that.
Me to give it up, I guess. But
all good.
David, tell us a little bit about kind of who you are, what you kind of do here at Hope Church, maybe a little bit of history of like how long you've been here, what brought you to Hope.
Yeah. My name is David Ward. My wife Mariah and I and our little boy Judah have been at Hope since February of 2021. So math's not working right now, but pushing 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
Came to Hope because the Lord showed us that our season at our last church was coming to a close, and by way of Justin Leedy, who you guys saw in the last podcast, the Lord opened a door through our friendship to bring us to Hope. Met Pastor Mike, and have been absolutely in love with the people of Hope in the city of Charlotte for the last 4 years. And so as far as what we do, we originally have done youth ministry, did youth ministry here for 2 years. And then also through that time stepped into leading worship, oversaw small groups as well as our young adults ministry. So
that's awesome.
That's kind of the short version of it.
So for those of you who are maybe tuning in for the first time, or maybe it's been a while since you watched an Overtime, we're kind of taking two church communities and bringing them together. This coming together of Center City Church and Hope Church. So we've been taking a little bit of time at the beginning of the podcast to just talk a little bit about some of this transition and what kind of looks like and feels like. Now, we have the distinct advantage that while other people have now known for the last several weeks, we've just kind of been wrestling with this for over a month now.
It's true, yeah.
So my question to you would be, what are you excited about when it comes to bringing these two communities together?
Oh, man. I think the cool part is that there's enough uniqueness about both churches that we can learn and grow from each other. But yet we have the same things in common, though, at the core of who we are and what we believe. And so bringing those two together, allowing us to reach two distinctly unique parts of Charlotte is an incredible thing.
Yeah.
And getting to do it together, getting to do it with somebody, that I've known for years and bring together two pretty awesome teams is going to be really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've been knee deep in a lot of the nuance of this all. And, I know a majority of you who maybe watch the podcast and also attend one of these two incredible churches that, again, are coming together now, may only kind of only see the effect of what your church does on Sunday morning, right? Like that's where we tangibly see the effect all week long. We've been sitting in meetings and kind of hanging out and trying to figure out how to navigate this in a way that honors God. And it's been great to get to know you. I got a little bit of a David Ward question. When was the first time you remember kind of strumming a guitar?
It's probably like 4.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I wasn't playing well, but I was strumming a guitar.
Yeah.
If you ask some other mutual friends of ours, pastors, Jim Kelly, other people, they'll tell you many stories of me playing air guitar on the front row at RCC as a 3 and 4 year old.
Okay.
When the worship team was playing. I used to be embarrassed by it, but at this point it is what it is. But always loved guitar, but ironically enough, never actually started taking it seriously till I was probably sophomore in high school. So
wow.
Yeah.
What is it about worship that it seems like has drawn your heart in this last season?
I think my love for music and also just my passion to want to give God my best and love him, blending those two things with something that moves you and makes you feel something that you can't explain otherwise, that obviously comes from being in the presence of God. And getting to love on him with our music is insane.
It's funny that you use that word blend, because this week in particular, we spoke out of this particular passage where Jesus is actually praying for the church in the book of John.
Right.
And he uses that phrase that they would be one the way that you and I are one. And it kind of communicates this truth that when we talk about the triune God, when we talk about the unity, that triune God's a very churchy word, but that they're three distinct offices, and yet they're the same God. There's God the Father, creator of all things, God the Son, Savior of the world, God the Holy Spirit, the one that's the comforter that's living in us and dwelling among us even now. So if we're going to live in that same way in unity with one another, it means that we have to embrace each other's differences. The phrase that we use Sunday is actually out of Romans. When Paul's writing, he said that we would live in harmony. And why that's important is because there's a difference between unison and harmony. And why I'm asking you this question is because I know you're a music guy. So how important is harmony to music?
I think it adds depth. I think it takes something that might be beautiful or pleasing to our ear, right, with music, but gives it a greater, takes it to a greater extent that gives us a full, a culmination of sound that might be missing if we just heard one individual piece. Again, like the example you used with Andrew on stage, for those that were at Hope, was a perfect layout of that.
The right harmony tends to move us.
Absolutely.
And can move a crowd. Like there's just a power to the right keys played in the right chord at the right time. Yes.
It invokes emotion.
What's the song that when you hear drives you to a point of prayer or a point of emotion every time?
Oh, okay. Worthy of It All.
Yeah.
Worthy of It All is one of those songs that, it's simple, but musically, I don't know. Gets a hold of me.
What's the song? There Is No Rival.
Oh,
There's No Rival.
What a beautiful name.
Oh my gosh, that song messes me up.
Yeah.
Every time. So if living in harmony with one another seems to be the way that biblically we see God's will for the church, that ultimately it reflects his nature. My question then is, what do you think keeps people from living in unity with people who are a little different than them? That's a tough one, I know. I mean, that's a little bit of a loaded question.
What keeps people from?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I guess if I would be vulnerable enough to speak like from my own personal experience, I know for me, like, it's the battle of being willing to step out of your comfort zone, to embrace something that's totally different than what you've experienced maybe in your own life. I think that living outside, coming out of your comfort zone in order to embrace something again, that's totally different. I think just takes a step of faith for some people's personality, and I think for others, what they like, and they may not be in angst. It may be more of just they just want what they want.
Yeah,
you know.
So moving to Charlotte.
Yeah.
Charlotte tends to be a little bit more of a diverse city than most places in North Carolina.
For sure.
Even I've always laughed because like even when doing district events, I feel like the Charlotte collection of churches is always a little bit more kind of just diverse within the constructs of our state.
Absolutely.
What has been some of the surprises that you have found when kind of diving into some of the diverse cultures that are represented in Hope?
Surprises. I don't know. Don't want to come off like I already expected things, but I guess I was raised in a pretty diverse community as a kid. So, surprises. Well, I guess surprises would actually be some of the similarities, ironically enough. That like people who are maybe first generation immigrants from a different country bring thoughts or fundamental philosophies on things in life that are not that different from other people that I've met that have lived in America for many generations back, and yet their fundamental beliefs ironically can be very similar, whether they're positive or whether they're can be difficult.
Yeah, it's funny. I know you're getting the brunt of this because you're the only person on the couch today.
Yeah,
so you're
no worries.
All the questions.
Yeah,
I feel
just
like
trying to keep up.
Interrogation with David. I think to that point, what I have found when it comes to people embracing people that are different, often there's fear attached to that.
Okay.
We're afraid of what we don't know.
Yeah.
And then when we start seeing something that is different than what we're accustomed to, or hearing things that are different than what we're accustomed to,
right?
Some red flags pop up.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you would think, well, John, like when it comes to theological issues, no, I'm talking about like simple things, like the way that we navigate home.
Right.
Are you a shoes off, a shoes on home?
Oh yeah.
Are you a open fridge, closed fridge home?
Right.
Are you a everybody pulls their weight, or mom is really super hospitable and we just kind of wait around and mom does everything? Like
right. Even the way people raise their kids, right?
Yes.
I mean, because we just had the privilege of getting to go on vacation with some very dear friends of ours, and we had a great conversation about even the difference in how people parent, and that was a really good conversation that we were able to have to respect each other and go, you know what, we don't always approach it the same way. But there can be an appreciation for it. But like you said, it can throw up flags though if you're not ready for it, or you're not prepared, or you're not,
But as a person who navigates teams and fighting to make sure that those teams embrace the beauty of some of that diversity and embrace some of the tension of that diversity, what do you do to kind of help people keep focused on the main thing and yet still celebrate the things that make us different?
I think as far as keeping the main thing, I think would be putting in front of them what our goal is or what our priority is, right? So for example, something that I tell anyone who joins our worship team is I say, hey, I want you to know that while we want to give the Lord our best and we are going to strive for excellence, we also just as much prioritize experiencing the presence of God in a way that makes worship not about us. And so when I lay that out in front of them, I go, hey, again, I don't know what your experience has been on another worship team or playing music, but when we get on stage, obviously it's important that we lead well and we do so with excellence. But communicating to them the priority is that we're ushering people into the presence of God and we're serving, even though we're on stage in front of people. So again, for that to come back to your question. I think when we communicate with people, our heart and our intentions, when they know the why behind something, it can open us up to be more receptive to the things that might not be comfortable.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's the challenge, within the scope of not just ministry, but within the scope of just faith. Our faith journal is remembering the why.
Yeah, that's so good.
It does seem like so many times our why is wrapped around our personal preferences or what's the easiest or what we've always done. And we've made idols out of methods versus our hearts focused on what God is saying and what God's doing.
Yeah.
I think it speaks a little bit to like drawing people back. Like your differences are beautiful. And yet in those differences, if we're not pointing and directing people to who Jesus is, ultimately your differences don't matter. We don't see any of that beauty because we're not moving in a united fashion.
Right.
But when we are quick to make sure that the vision and the mission's placed in front of people, not just from the church constructs, because we hear that, but I think there's a mission/vision that's available to everyone who calls themselves the children of God.
Yeah, it's fundamental. Yeah.
Go out to all the world and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Exactly.
I'll make you my witnesses in Judea, Jerusalem, and the ends of the earth. Samaria is in there somewhere. So within the scope of that, like we know what the mission and the vision is.
Right.
And what I love is the beauty of our differences mean that we get there different ways, meaning like we get to communicate that in different ways. We get to experience that in different ways.
Right.
But if the main thing is not the main thing, none of those differences even matter.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. Because sometimes we can build our faith around the methodology, right? And we build our faith around what we've always known. And how, like you said, how limiting that can be, because if we're more focused on the methodology or the style or the personal preference, it ruins the whole point.
I had a great conversation with Justin earlier where we were talking about what's sacred, like that phrase, like what's sacred, what's not sacred. And it's funny, you only figure out what's sacred when you sense the tremble of change. Then instantly people are like, oh, but not that. Who was it that said, you find out what's really important when your house is burning down?
Wow.
Because it's the first thing you run to grab.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
It's the
for
first
sure.
thing, you know.
Yep.
For I think my boys right now would be their Switch, or their iPad. You know, for some of you it might be like your picture book, your album. You know, not that we have those anymore.
Sure.
Your laptop.
Or as you say, the devices that hold those memories too, right?
The wedding ring, the jewelry, and then maybe you're contemplating, oh my goodness, the insurance card. But I'm not sure that that's on the top of the list, right?
Sure.
So I think sometimes, to your point, one of the struggles we have is reminding people it's not about the method. It's not about the thing that you've been comfortable with for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's the thing that God is asking us to do and where he's calling us to be.
Absolutely.
And the picture we get to reflect. So
absolutely.
In the message, we talked about not only how the unity reflects the God's nature, but then we talked a little bit about God's glory. Mm-hmm. So this is where, as a worship pastor, I'm going to sit back and just say, David, explain God's glory to us. Because 80% of your songs that you sing, and I say yours, even though you didn't write them, I know, but we sing about God's glory quite a bit.
Yeah.
And yet I think for most people who are watching this podcast, and even if you've been in church your whole life, we really have a hard time grasping the significance of the glory of God.
Yeah. I think you hit on it on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. You said that you could spend 20 years trying to research and come up with a clear explanation of God's glory and still never fully communicate
so tough.
Yeah.
Because in this passage, he's really clear, like, that you would give them the same glory you gave me, which it's just a crazy picture to me that the glory of God, I want to make sure that I read the passage right. I did a horrible job. Pastor Ashley is not with us. She normally does this a lot better than I am. But she did in John 17, he says, I've given them the glory you gave me, which again is such a tough concept to grab a hold of. But you've been raised in the church like your whole life.
Yeah.
When you consider the idea of the glory of God, where do you think most people kind of land on this idea if you were to ask them what the glory of God means?
Oh, well, I know, like, I think one perspective of the glory of God would be like his presence. I think that's one example that I know, like, even for a long time I would have probably would have said to experience his presence. But then when you talk about giving glory, I think how much more of that comes back to fear of the Lord, comes back to reverence, because if it's something that is exchanged or moved back and forth, right, then it's more than just his presence, I guess, if that makes sense. But I don't even know. I mean, it's hard to put into words.
It's a challenging conversation. 2 Peter, the writer kind of explains what the product of that glory is. So he says, God has given us everything we need for living godly lives. So, I'm sorry, verse 3 says, by his divine power, God has given us everything we need to live godly lives. So I would argue that the glory of God gives us the ability to live in that space of a godly life.
Yeah.
It goes on to say, and because of his glory and excellence, he has given us great and precious promises. Yeah. So the promises are made available to us by the glory that God gives
imparts,
us, which imparts to us.
Yeah.
Then it goes on to say, these promises enable you to share his divine nature and escape the world's corruptions. So this is where I got a little excited this week. So much of sermon writing, you do kind of in a bubble. We do a team approach. So me and Ashley actually preached a very similar sermon on Sunday between both expressions. Right. Although her harmony illustration was a lot stronger, but that's because she knows how to sing and I don't. So, but in this passage, one of the things that I nerded out about was this idea of connectivity through fiber optics. Like this fiber optics cable, you connect one source, and basically the objective of the fiber optics cable is to repeat that source somewhere else that to be a perfect reflection, which requires pure glass. And, in order to create pure glass, this is where I got nerded out this week. After I preached the message, I had one of my new friends came up to me. He used to be he used to work for Corning, and he mentioned how he's a chemical engineer. And a lot of people freak out because they're like, why would you work for a glass company as a chemical engineer? Yeah. He said that a large percentage of Corning's glass is made up of chemicals because they can control the purity. That ultimately, if you can't control the purity, it's tough to be able to rely on the data being transported in that cable.
Yeah.
And then I had somebody else who actually works in the engineering field, although he's not technically an engineer himself, although I think he has some schooling that way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he mentioned was that that's why making glass, I don't know if you know this, but making glass in a weightless environment is actually not only easier, but you can produce more pure glass because there's not the bogging down of gravity that draws. So you can create cleaner glass in space, which again, I'm like, where was all this while I was writing the message?
Who discovered that?
I mean, NASA, apparently.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I do think it's important because what we see is if the glory of God is what we need to live godly lives, and the glory of God gives us access to his great and precious promises, and the glory of God gives us access again to his divine nature that allows us to escape from the corruption of the world.
Right.
Ultimately, it's that unity, that if we're unified around that glory, that unity, that glory is what keeps us connected.
Yeah.
We're able to live in this place of grace with other people. We're able to live in this grace where we're celebrating their strengths versus kind of looking down on them.
Yeah.
Where we're not fighting for comparison, but rather elevating each other. Because ultimately, we know the goal is not self-elevation.
Absolutely.
But the goal is to elevate his name.
Absolutely.
So I also know that one of the things you do here is navigate life with a bunch of young adults.
Yeah.
So in 2024, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges to living a life that glorifies God in a world that seems just bent on making sure that people glorify themselves?
I mean, fundamentally, humility, right? You said challenges or?
Yeah, what are some of the challenges? No,
challenges. Well, obviously humility, pursuing humility obviously would be a challenge because it's countercultural. Challenges. Yeah, I think finding the ability to put other people first, because so much of the culture we live in tells us to prioritize ourselves, to prioritize the things that we want, we feel like we need, we feel like we desire. Trying to think of specifics. I think just even the way that things are wired, as far as our pace of life, and maybe even the speed at which, like, I'm just thinking about something like a drive-through. Like now the fact that you go to Chick-fil-A and you can do the mobile through where you scan it, and the whole thing is so that you wait less. But the less that you wait, the less interaction you're having with other people, and the less interaction you have with them, the less opportunity you have to get to know them.
So pace is an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say so. Now I know that also my personality is one that probably prefers a bit of a slower pace, but
no, I think there's something to be said, specifically when it comes to taking the time. Like you can't live in strong harmony with others if you're too busy trying to get, a phrase that they use playing basketball is you're too busy trying to get your stuff off. You're trying to get your jump shot. You're trying to get your points. Yeah. And you're not worried about the team
trying to build
that's
your stat
around
line.
you.
Yeah.
You're too busy doing you versus allowing this, again, the Spirit of God to work within concert.
For sure.
And building each other's strengths versus weaknesses.
For sure.
So to the average 20-year-old who's maybe watching.
Sure.
And they're like I struggle because of pace, or I struggle because of the pressures. Like some of this is just the pressure of comparison, the monster of anxiety that's kind of fed by Instagram feeds.
Yeah, and a stat, or not a status, I lost the word I was going to say, but basically how you present yourself.
Yeah, like an appearance deal.
Yeah.
What do you say to that 20-year-old? How do they pump the brakes? How do they find themselves at a place of sober mind that they can kind of learn how to embrace the beauty in others and community?
Yeah. Man, I guess one thing for me would be, it's something I need to grow in as well, but in being intentional about the time that you carve out to be with the Lord, so that you're in a healthy place when you are around other people, so that what you're giving to other people is healthy, and you've walked through your own challenges, your own hardships or hurts, hang-ups. But also, again, not trying to speak as someone who's got this all together at all. Yeah. But I think another thing would be knowing how to intentionally take time to be present with other people. Now, I know for me as an extrovert, that comes easy.
Yeah.
I thrive off of being around other people, but being intentional about laying out opportunities to have relationship that's more than just a quick text or a quick phone call or a communication digitally or something,
So I'm an extrovert too.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I find it difficult sometimes because as much as I want to connect with people, it's always surface.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm busy trying to figure out the next connection
Okay.
versus spending time going deep.
Yeah, sure.
I love
that
the
makes
fact
sense.
that you're like the phrase you kept using over and over, like around the idea of being intentional with time.
Mm-hmm.
I am knee deep in a book called Digital Liturgy right now.
Yeah.
And so you guys are probably getting tired of hearing about it already.
No, I want to learn more about it.
Yeah, but so much of the way that we've been shaped, so much of the way that we navigate our world is based off the technology that shapes us. So the nuance of the book has more to do with hardware versus software. Like, this is how we're wired, not necessarily the content that's coming off of the computer, but what the computer is designed to do.
Yeah.
And
To
one of
pull
the-
out of us
Yes.
almost.
There is an extreme selfishness in the way that we navigate our world today.
Wow.
And it really kind of comes from this place of like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, we'll find if we just count our scrolling time, we have plenty of time, but we fight more to numb and to be quote unquote connected online
Right.
versus connected with our neighbor. And I would say that ultimately that's feeding some of this monster of disunity and makes it tough to live in harmony with people.
Right. Well, and it's to that point, right, is when we use that explanation of we're online to connect with other people, but if it's only connecting with people that are like-minded with us or have the same priorities or the same interest, then it does. Like you said, it makes it very easy to be so much, have a greater disconnect with people who are not like us, because it's so easy to narrow in our focus and the people we're connecting with.
Yeah.
That are just people who basically are feeding back to us. I'm forgetting there's a term for it, but feeding back to us what we already believe or want
the
or
echo
desire.
chamber.
Yeah, exactly. The echo chamber.
It's funny because some of my best friends are guys who we have maybe one thing in common, but most of the stuff that make us up are not. But I have friends who have never had dads.
Okay.
I have friends who come from completely different cultural backgrounds. I have friends who don't listen to the same music I do.
Right.
I have friends that are super close to me that, quite honestly, on a political scale, we grew up in different worlds,
Right.
never mind
Sure.
a difference of opinion. And yet, because I was forced to know them because this was the 15 kids in my youth group,
Okay.
or forced to know them because this was the 20 guys on my basketball
Yeah.
court,
Right.
versus I have millions of people that I can kind of pick and choose from.
Yeah.
And what I'm picking and choosing is more of a reflection of me, not of the heart of God.
Right.
So
It can be
ultimately,
dangerous.
it becomes almost like idolatry. And what I'm idolizing is me.
Yeah.
I really just
Yeah.
love myself so much. I want
Yeah.
people who look, act,
Right.
walk, talk.
Right.
So it does create a sense of disunity and a lack of harmony.
Right.
You might find unisons, but I'm not sure you're going to find harmony.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that
and
can
like
be
you said, and
dangerous.
it's almost like just trying to line up 12 different people playing one note, line after line after line, exactly, that there's no, it doesn't, again, that word depth keeps coming back to me in this conversation, but there's no depth or even a wider spread of perspective that's part of the way that the Lord wired us, you know, with the reason that he allowed us to all be raised and live and have a variety of life experiences that are so drastically different.
So then how then, again, maybe someone's watching the podcast today and they're like, man, I'm just not living in that harmony with people. Like, that's just not where I'm at. What would you say is this is the first step. This is how you go from completely disconnected to starting the process of reconnecting with good, strong, godly community.
It's going to sound like a plug, but find a local church and find a small group that you're just willing to just step into. And maybe you have nothing in common with those people, but find people that have the fundamental belief of knowing Jesus and loving Jesus like you do, just fundamentally knowing and loving Jesus, and then be intentional about trying to create a connection there.
Yeah.
Because finding a body of people, a community of people.
Yeah, a couple things on finding a body of people. number one, if you're looking for the perfect body,
Yeah, you're not gonna find it.
it's not.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
The minute I heard somebody say, they said the minute you walked in is the minute, talking to whoever the person is that's looking, says the minute that person walked in is the minute it became imperfect if it was somehow perfect beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I am a big a believer in, instead of finding a church family with the question, how can they serve me?
Right.
I'm really big about saying, find a church family where you can serve.
Right.
Where there's
you can contribute.
Space for your giftings and space for your differences.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this coming together. So much of the question I get, I've been bouncing back and forth for the last couple weeks. I'll preach once, hear hope, and then go back to Center City and preach. And really, honestly, it's been fun. There's been some, it's been a fun experience. But one of the questions I keep coming back is, how do you feel when you're in the room? Like, how did it feel to be in that space? Because I'm getting it from Center City people, like, you don't know the people at Hope, like, how's it feeling? And then I'm getting it from Hope people, like, you're going back to this place that you consider home, like, how do we feel to you? And what I keep saying is it all feels like home.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I keep saying that is because the beauty of these churches, and I know that not every church is like this, I know that not every city is like this, so I'll again, one of the things that I love about where we're at is the diversity in the room.
Oh, for sure. If I can speak to that for a quick second, like, that was a huge reason that Mariah and I ended up at Hope. We walked in the room at Hope for the first time. Kind of nobody knew us. It was great, but walked in the room and said, "This is what heaven's going to look like." Yeah. Like, there were people of every race and creed, but not just that. Like, I think something that I brag about Hope, and I firmly believe is true about Center City, even from people I've met there, is that we're not just diverse in our ethnicity, we're diverse in our socioeconomic status.
Yes.
We have people from every walk of life, from every life experience, from Christian homes to have just gotten saved 2 weeks ago, and in every aspect of diversity. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's exciting. It really is. And I think it's in that we see the heart of God reflected to the community.
Yeah.
So, David, where can we find you? What are you plugging?
I don't have anything to plug. I'm not even. I feel like I'm getting old. Like, I don't even.
I'm just kidding with you.
You can find me on Facebook occasionally if you want to talk about cars or sports. But I'm starting to get old. So
I was about to say Facebook.
I mean, I have Instagram. I don't even remember what my username is, though. I use it. I'm trying to back off of it a little bit for the reason of making space and changing my pace. So
I love that. I love that. Well, listen, if you are joining us and you've kind of made it to this point of the podcast, thank you so much for hanging out with us. So much is happening. Normally we kind of give everybody a little preview of what's to come, but quite honestly, it's all over the place for the next couple weeks as we kind of hone in. We love it. Yeah, absolutely, as we hone in. So thanks, David, so much for hanging out with us today, man.
Absolutely.
We'll see you guys next week. Yes. If you're in the Charlotte area, this is so tough. I don't know how Ashley even did this last week, but you can join us at Center City if you're in the West Charlotte area for 9 and 11. And then if you're in the North Charlotte area, you can join us at Hope at 10:15. And we'd love for you to come and hang out. All right. So we'll see you next week.